So we have a lot of wonderful questions, and we're going to go in a couple of different ways. And I'd like to first start off with education and our young people, because as we've told you, Charlie needs to leave at 8, and so let's get that out of the way. Because I think, Charlie, you can introduce. With Turning Point, you're going around from campus to campus. You're seeing some amazing things on campus. Can you share with the folks what you're seeing on campus?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot, that's for sure. We have a pretty good pulse on what's happening at most colleges. My next book is, and Dennis, I got to get you to endorse this book. It's called The College Scam. So I think it's right down your strike zone there. I think we have way too many people going to college in our country, and for whatever reason, very few people are willing to say that out loud. I have my own theory as to why that actually is. But what I find mostly on college campuses are students that have been told to believe a certain kind of worldview, lacking in wisdom, absolutely. But it's also, they've been, I think, scammed into this system to borrow a bunch of money they do not have, to study things that don't matter, to find jobs that do not exist. And then once they do graduate with a meaningless piece of paper, they then go into kind of these urban areas where they're living on top of each other, where they're renting and not owning. And we're wondering why all of a sudden they don't want to get married, they're not having children, they're not starting businesses, and they're kind of in these heavily liberal urban environments where it's impossible to own any sort of land. So it kind of becomes the tragedy of the commons. And this is, in my opinion, and I think Dennis might agree, why is America in the place that it's in? It's because we sent our most prized possession year after year to college universities for almost no good reason. And as someone who did not go to college and escaped it, I could tell you that maybe 5 to 10% of students that go to college, I think, actually benefit from it. A vast majority of young people, when they go to college, say, I wish I did not have to be here. I'm not learning anything. It's not developing my character. I feel it's making me a meaner, less complete human being. In fact, I think that high school kids are actually far more mature than most college kids because their parents are around, so there's some form of accountability. So with all that kind of pretext kind of around it, as we visit these college campuses, we're on tour, yeah, there's hope, but I won't lie to you. We got a huge problem. And we're all participating in it. We're sending our money to these colleges. We're sending money to these universities. I'm trying to not tell you as bluntly as I can. The country's going to end in 10 years if this continues. I don't know how else to tell you this. You cannot have a society replicate its values when 70% of my generation thinks America's systemically racist. How does that one work out? 65% of students in college think that America's an awful, evil, misogynistic country. You want to know why this is all, why you get AOC, how you get Rashida Tlaib, how you get Ilhan Omar? We created Ilhan Omar. We did that. First of all, we brought her in because of Minnesota Nice, right? So Minnesota Nice, you get Somalians that want to kill you, right? Which is one of the dumbest, one of the most, I think it is the perfect example of how, it's great to your point, Dennis, how nice people can do things that are totally unwise that destroy your civilization, which is the importation of Somalians into Minnesota. There was no reason to do what you guys did. And I know a lot of you stood against it. But everyone's afraid to talk about this because they don't want to be called a racist. Has the Somali community improved Minnesota? Are you kidding me? Not even close. I mean, it has destroyed Minnesota from a political demographic issue, from Ilhan Omar. She's a poster child as to why we should have strict immigration in our country. We saved her, and she says nothing but awful and terrible things about our nation. And we should be unafraid to say this out loud. But then Ilhan Omar, why does she hate America so much? Not because she was from Somalia, because she went to our schools. That's the amazing thing. And that's the other point of it, is that it's not just because of the culture that doesn't assimilate well. Where I was just walking around the Mall of America, literally last day, I could not believe. I saw more people in full, Mogadishu-style dress than I saw in Western wear. I am not kidding, no exaggeration. Outnumbered it. We did this to ourselves because we want to be nice. I guess. Maybe you guys could enlighten me to what other reason. And so, but the kicker of the whole thing, though, is that a strong education system would have taught Ilhan Omar gratitude, not venom and anger, not turn her into an activist. She was rescued out of a Kenyan refugee camp thanks to the generosity and benevolence of America to come here, to come become a elected official insurgent to tell you you're an awful, terrible person. Excuse me when my patience wears thin for all of that. Where now I have to hear her lecture us from Washington, D.C., that America's systemically racist, that on 9/11 some people did something incredibly anti-Semitic, by the way. And she's exactly what universities produce. So how do we change this? It changes in a variety of different ways. We have to stop sending so many kids to college. My mission in the next 18 months is to try to, through all of my efforts, through writing the book and our advocacy, decline college enrollment by 10%. That would make America an infinitely better place to live. And so happy to talk about that and how we can all kind of play a role in that. But also, I could tell you when we're on the college campuses, the biggest problem we encounter is that we cannot find rooms big enough to be able to facilitate the demand of students that want to show up to speak. So despite all the headwinds and all the kind of negativity I can't share with you, there still is hope because there is curiosity out there. We have to do a lot more. PragerU and Turning Point USA, in my opinion, are two organizations that are doing more to actually fix this problem. But again, I will not lie to you. We're up against some massive odds here. We're up against multi-billion-dollar institutions where they are spending year after year. And I'll close with this because it could, I could literally give a whole speech on this. And Alan and I have talked about this for years. You want to know what really animates me? I visit over 150 schools. And I used to make a habit of walking the campus before I would speak. Now it's too dangerous. They try to kill me. It's true, all the death threats and stuff we receive. But I'd always like to look at the buildings. I like to look at what are the names on these buildings. And then after the 5th and 10th or 15th campus I visited, I realized that every single one of the buildings and the biggest donors to these cesspools are people that agree with us. We did this. It's conservatives that have voluntarily not just sent their kids, but wrote 50, 100, $200 million checks to the assembly lines of activists that create the next generation of AOCs and Ilhan Omars. If we get to root causes, everybody, it's our education system. I know a lot of you saying, Charlie, it's happening earlier in high school. It's happening in elementary schools. That's all true, and that's why school boards and the school board movement isn't so effective. But there is no good reason to just send your kid to college because you think that's what needs to happen. And until we have an honest assessment of that, we're not going to be able to fix those kind of root causes. We have 23 million kids in college right now in our country. 23 million kids. Right now, kids are being taught there is no God, there is no morality, there is no existence. I have students that approach me and listen to our radio show and podcast, and they say, Charlie, can you try to tell me why you think existence itself is real? This is what they spend time thinking about. This is when you send a kid to college, they'll say, we don't even know if this, what around us, is actually real existence. That we could be living in some sort of a video game. I say, you're going into debt for this, let alone paying for this? I'll say one final thing. Even worse than the donors giving money are Republican and red states that for years have refused to defund these colleges and universities. Minnesota's exempt from that because you're run by, a bunch of Soviets. But, you go kind of like North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas. And the reason is because it is the third rail. Everyone likes cheering for the football team. Everyone gets rich off of these colleges. Meanwhile, we send our most prized possession to go teach them there is no God and to hate the country. We could change it and reverse it, but it's going to take a lot of action. That's for sure.
I don't really want to talk. I'm very happy to listen to Charlie. Okay, so we'll fight about that. I've been saying to parents much of my career that sending your child to college is playing Russian roulette with their values. That's the phrase I've used. But I've always noted that in Russian roulette there is one bullet in 5 empty chambers. In college, there are 5 bullets in 1 empty chamber. And the proof is, ask I'm sure that I could do this with this audience. When I meet young people, I ask if they're married, and when I meet parents and grandparents, I ask how many children do you have, and whatever number they tell me, I say, if you don't mind my asking, and they don't, interestingly. May I ask how many of them share your values? It is extremely rare that all of their children share their values. It happens. If you're one of those, you should thank God every day and every afternoon, every evening, every morning. Because it's not your fault even if they don't. They went to a place at the most impressionable times in their lives and learned that everything you stand for is wrong. This is how bad it is. I think, in addition to college, I think that people should homeschool their children now as often as possible. And for those of you who are grandparents and have children who generally agree with you, but are incredibly and understandably intimidated by the notion of homeschooling, how much time and money it would take, because someone may have to give up some of their income or all of their income, one of the partners, you offer to pay. A lot of grandparents have more money than their children, and a lot of, in such cases, you should offer to pay for the homeschooling of your child, and if they say, well, I couldn't do that, you say, please, I beg of you. It is a favor to me and to the country that you allow me to do this. If I'm asking you to sacrifice by having homeschooling, the least I could do is put my money where my mouth is. So that might be something that you could do. I personally would not send my child to almost any American high school or elementary school today, including most Jewish and Christian ones, most Catholic, most Protestant, and most Jewish. They're just as woke as the others, except they're woke with the Torah or they're woke with a cross. Woke with a cross or Torah is actually worse, because then there's no hope. If religion is the hope, and religion has been perverted and into God not liking freedom, the founders believed that God and freedom were synonymous. That's why the Liberty Bell has one verse on it from Leviticus, and you shall proclaim liberty throughout the land unto all its inhabitants. The Leviticus 25. Charlie, you know why he knows that? I'll tell you why. Because he didn't go to college. I'm not joking. It sounds funny, and it is funny, but it's also true. I told Alan, whom you'll meet in a moment, I told Alan that I want to send Will Witt, although if one of your guys did it, it'd be just as happy, just to go to Harvard and just to stop kids in the middle of a campus. I'm sorry, just doing a survey here. Could you identify Leviticus? My belief is that 90% of Harvard students could not identify Leviticus, and the founders knew it by heart. That's what we've come to. Do you know that you couldn't get a degree from Harvard until 1800 if you didn't know Hebrew? That's how important the Old Testament was to the founders of this country. Did you know that the Yale insignia is in Hebrew? And you know what it says? Urim v'tumim, the breastplate of the high priest from Exodus. How many people know what's on the breastplate of the high priest in Exodus? Very few. And yet Yale has it as its insignia. They're so ignorant of this at Yale that they haven't protested it. That's the beauty. They have no idea what the hell it is. They think it says kosher food. It's the only Hebrew they've ever seen is kosher food. So that's probably what they think. What the hell? Kosher food, fine with me. They would prefer halal food, but nevertheless, that's what they would put there. You know, it's fascinating when you mentioned all the people in veils that you saw here in Minnesota. So I was thinking of how radically opposed I am to the veil, and I believe it is evil. It is completely dehumanizing. The proof is men don't wear it. Oh, it's not dehumanizing. It honors women, so why don't you honor men with it? You're phony. You're such a phony. But I now realize what I consider dehumanizing is now expected. Masks. What's the difference between a mask and a veil? There is no difference. Just the reasoning is different. But they're both religion. One is Islam, one is safetyism. They're both religions. Secular religion always replaces by biblical religion. Always. And bad stuff. Never good stuff. As I tell my fellow Jews, hey, guess what? When Christianity died in Europe, we didn't get Boy Scouts. We got fascists, Nazis, and communists. What do you think is going to happen in America when Christianity dies? And then you hear crickets. Because they think, oh, secularism is so beautiful. Really? Where has it turned out beautiful for a whole society? Where exactly? My last column 2 weeks ago, not this week, was I cited two secular Jews who were professors at Humboldt State, California State University at Humboldt. They wrote a book, The Altruistic Personality. It's one of the major studies of altruism, specifically who rescued Jews, which is the ultimate form of altruism, because they risked their lives for strangers of a different religion, different ethnicity, everything. So they studied this for decades. And the reason was not only because they were professors of sociology, Pearl and Samuel Oliner, but because they had been saved by Polish Catholics in Poland. So they had a specific desire to understand what animates good, which I think is infinitely more important than what animates evil. Evil is much more understandable to me than good. Good is rarer than great good is rarer than great evil, and so that should be studied much more than it is. There are 25,000 books at least on the Holocaust, maybe 100,000, and maybe 25 books on rescuers of Jews. Just to give you an example. People don't study good because there's no wisdom. Because since the Enlightenment, people believe people are basically good. So goodness is the norm. They don't understand, as every religious person in this room understands, that the will of man's heart is towards evil from his youth, from Genesis. I knew that in third grade. I had more wisdom in third grade than almost any professor at Yale, Harvard, and Princeton. Not because I was wise, because I was taught wisdom. And wisdom begins not just with God, but understanding how flawed human nature is. So these are the operative elements that are taking place in our society today that he described, and I back to my belief that you need to homeschool kids and the damage that is being done. You mentioned, Charlie, Ilhan Omar, and we think so similarly. It's quite beautiful. I love hearing people I agree with, because I read the New York Times every day, so this is like a vacation. And the thing about Ilhan Omar that I find most disturbing is not her anti-Semitism, is not her anti-Americanism. It's her ingratitude. There are many ugly traits, but I think ingratitude is the worst. That's the worst. You're on the lowest rung of humanity if you're an ingrate. And do you know what you get? I say this often on my radio show, so many of you may have heard this. You get a BA in ingratitude. You get a master's in ingratitude. You get a doctorate of ingratitude. That's what the degree is ultimately in. You learn nothing except to be an ingrate, vis-a-vis your parents and vis-a-vis America. That's quite something. And I'll end my little moment here with, you're so right about being taught to loathe America and everything we stand for. I don't know how many of you watch my fireside chat, and I'm not asking you to show of hands, because I don't want to be humiliated. But no, that was a joke. I know. Anyway, if Charlie watches every episode, my cup runneth over. But in any event, a lot of people do. I'm just being cute. I know a lot. Thank God a lot of people do, because I know how often I'm stopped at airports by young people asking me how Otto is. The fact that many of you laughed proves that you watch it. Otto is my bulldog, the most famous dog in America, I am proud to say. And by the way, I'd like to add how well my wife and I have raised him. It has not gone to his head. Just want you to know. There is not an ounce of arrogance in Otto about being that famous. Anyway, this. So you may have heard me talk about this. What was the point? Whenever I get onto Ottawa, I always forget the point that I was about to make. Oh yes. So on my fireside chat, I must say, I've been with just about anyone I've ever wanted to be with. I'm a very lucky human being. I must say she's in the top 5 human beings I have ever spent time with, a North Korean defector. If you could watch that, of all my 210 fireside chats, watch that one. I don't normally interview people. This woman grew up in North Korea, escaped as a teenager. Almost every North Korean girl that gets into China is then sex trafficked. So she was sex trafficked at 13. She saw her mother raped. Her father was tortured nearly to death because if your family flees, you are tortured. That's the North Korean way of keeping you in the country. She was one of the happiest human beings that I was ever with, which in and of itself is a statement about her greatness. But her theme, one of her big themes is she just got her graduate degree at Columbia University. And she said, I heard more anti-American talk there than in North Korea. And she's right. She is right. That's all you hear at Columbia. Columbia is a cesspool. Columbia is a wasteland. When I was there, it was awful, but nothing like today. A North Korean saying this. She thought she came to the land of freedom, and she comes to the land where she's taught that freedom is phony. So just to give you an idea of how serious the problem is, that this is what a North Korean had to say about a college education in America.